Welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
To me, being perfect is not about that scoreboard out there.
This is a chance of a lifetime.
When you can understand the person, you can then work towards a common goal.
We are all on the same team.
Know your role and do it to the best of your ability.
Focus on the fundamentals. We've gone over time and time again.
Your defense has got to be better.
Leave no doubt tonight.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
Hello and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast, where we believe that there is no algorithm for leadership, and so we interview great sports coaches from around the world to try and find ideas to help all of us be better leaders. Our great coach on this episode is Tim Sheens. Tim is an Australian Rugby League coach. He played 166 games for the Penrith Panthers and then moved into coaching in 1984. He coached the Canberra Raiders to premierships in 1989, 1990 and 94, and then in 2005 led the West's Tigers to their first premiership. He has also coached the New South Wales team to the 1991 State of Origin Series win and the Australian team to the 2013 World Championship. Tim has been in the coaching business for over 40 years, and he has so much insight, wisdom and ideas to share. Some of the ones that stayed with me afterwards were the philosophy he borrowed from an American coach of being consistent in treating everybody differently, and how as a result he doesn't see people management in black and white terms. How he identifies 3 things that effective teams need to be doing every week. The first is working on their public perception, the second is thinking about the opposition, and the third is making sure that small groups within the organisation don't start talking negatively about other small groups. And how the best coaches are good recruiters and they select people who are going to suit their style. And just before we go to the interview, today's podcast is brought to you by the Macquarie University Business School's MBA program. Designed to empower, challenge and transform, the Macquarie MBA gives you the business skills and knowledge you need to succeed in an evolving global economy. The program bridges the gap between theory and real-world application, bringing together world-leading professors, executives and industry partners to teach you how business can be used for good. I have just started working with the team at Macquarie on some projects and can attest to the quality of the people and material. To find out more, search for Macquarie University Business School's MBA. And now, please enjoy our interview with Tim Sheens.
You're listening to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Tim Sheens, good afternoon and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
I'm good. I'm thrilled to get you on. You're a legend of rugby league here in Australia, and I'm just thrilled that you said yes. So Tim, before we get going though, could you tell us where you are in the world and what you've been doing so far today?
I'm living in Sydney. I've spent, prior to coming back to the Tigers last year, I'd spent 6 or 7 years in England and becoming a citizen as well, so dual citizenship. And my wife and I quite enjoy England, so we'll be travelling between there and here. So, but the club asked me to come back initially to do administration, and then, of course, it moved forward onto interim coaching for Benji, to be quite honest, was pretty much how you'd call it. So, that's finished, and so I'm sort of sitting around every day's a Sunday, Paul. You can get up when you want. It reminds me of COVID again, that dreaded thing, where when we were in England, it shut the football down, to be quite honest, and so I ended up getting a bit lazy. So, I've been training and doing a bit extra, mate, yeah.
I can't imagine. We're going to go through the long arc of your career, Tim. laziness isn't a word that comes to mind. But anyway, let's go through the story. And Tim, if I could, you've been in the game your whole life. You've coached against the greats, the greatest that rugby league in Australia has ever known. And you've also met so many other great coaches from sports, and not just in Australia, UK and Europe and everywhere else. But if I could start with just a simple question to get us going, what is it you think the great coaches do differently that sets them apart?
Yeah, that's a good point. You're talking about assistant coaches, for instance, or junior coaches, as opposed to maybe a professional coach. Like I've come from the semi-professional era, and through 97, it went full-time and professional in Australia with NRL. So I've seen, the 2 days a week, 3 days a week training times and the full-on, every day, basically. I think to be successful, there's a number of things. You've got to be a good manager of people. When it's all said and done, whether it's a CEO of any firm, it's managing your people. In our sport, of course, it's a team sport. There's 13 start and another 4 are used from the bench. But in saying that, it's a team sport, but it's a team sport is full of individuals. And a lot of coaches fail to address that. They are coaching as a team. They attack them as a team. For instance, I'll give you a quick one. You're getting beat. 4 of the players are really having a go. They're bleeding from the nose and the jaw and all the other things. And the coach gets at half time and gives them all a spray. That the 4 players, particularly if they're the veteran players, the 29-year-olds, don't appreciate that sort of thing. So it is very difficult to understand just when you need to deal with them as a team and when you need to deal with them as individuals. So that's one thing. I think also it's the time frame. It's certainly full on. It's a 24/7 job, full-time football, professional football, and you're dealing with, as opposed to your assistant coaches, you're dealing with the politics of the game. You're dealing with the politics within your club, outside your club, the media, social media, sponsors, and it's an endless, I've got to do something there. I've got to go to this function. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And it's something you've got to do. It's an obligation you do. Most senior coaches get well paid. And so it's not just a matter of turning up game day, training and going on game day to get it done. It's a club thing, and you've got to deal with lots of different people. On top of that, you've got to set an environment. I think the environment that the senior coach sets is so important. For instance, I believe you want the players to come to want to be at training, if you know what I mean. If you don't set the system up in a way that they're busting to be there early and they leave late, that's the type of person you want, and that's the type of system you have to have inside your club.
Tim, you talked there about being good at managing people. It's the first thing you said, actually. Now, if I've got my research right, you started taking on leadership roles way back in secondary school. And I'm wondering, who got you started back then? Who was helping you develop this man management skill back then?
I suppose I was born Catholic, Catholic school, so I was always Christian brothers or Morris brothers. Their discipline was strong. In fact, so strong you copped the strap if you did the wrong thing in those days. But I was for whatever reason, I don't know. I was popular with the schoolmates, and I seemed to always be a prefect, as in school print, and then I ended up school captain at St Gregory's in my last year of school. But I always seemed to be popular in that regard, whether it was because I played football and I was captain of the team regularly or something like that, I don't know. But the brothers, Morris brothers and Christian brothers, had a lot to do with it. Particularly my 2 years at St Gregory's, the Morris brothers there were very, and I was at the age then of 17, 18, that type of age. my father had passed away, my grandfather had passed away, so not many men in my life, but I was at boarding school for 2 years, and had a lot of help from the brothers. As I said, I was school principal there in '68. God, how long ago was that? And that helps. I had to get up and make speeches. I had to meet people from the dignitaries that came to the school, and I was I was representing the students. So that had something to do with it, I suppose. And I enjoy players who are captains. Generally, the 13 World Cup side I took had a heap of captains in it. Captains of their respective sides, and generally there's a personality with a captain. One way or another, and so not that I'd pick them just to be because they're a captain, but you'd be surprised how many captains play for Australia, for instance, or play for New South Wales and Queensland, that type of thing. Yeah,
I went to a brothers' school that was marked by discipline, but your style's doesn't seem to be focused on that, Tim. It's interesting that these people shaped you early, but it seems to be very calm and focused on the team and its strengths, not necessarily, discipline and hard rigor, which we often hear about when we talk to rugby league coaches.
Yeah, I think people don't know as much about me as they think they do. I've had my little rants, and but it's not something that's a constant day in and day out. My personality is to work with the individual and try to get, you reason with them, you help them, and you show interest in them, you generally get a result. Now, the difference is, though, is I use it's not mine. I got it from an American coach. I can't recall exactly where it was that long ago, but it was be consistent with treating everybody differently. Now, that is a 29-year-old veteran and a 19-year-old rookie are two different people. And so if they're both playing in the same team, you've got to treat them differently, but be fair. So it's a matter of working. I prefer to work on that system. Then again, sometimes the so-called disciplinarians, if they do the wrong thing as a 29-year-old veteran or a 19-year-old kid, they still get disciplined, but it's a different discipline. I expect more from the veteran. I'd give the kid a second chance. Depending on what it is, it's a third or fourth chance even. Sometimes it's just not that black and white that, make another mistake and you're gone from the team or you're gone from the club. But a veteran could play poorly for a couple of games and still make the team, whereas a 19-year-old's not going to, that type of thing. So it is there's variation to your disciplines and how you handle it. But I find, you've got to assess exactly what makes the athlete tick, whether it's, arm around the shoulder or a kick up the tail, a reminder about this, that, and the other thing. You've just got to be switched on. You've got to know your player, know your people. And that's just not your players. That's your coaching staff. That's your general staff. That's the office staff. That's the CEO. You've got to know how to handle them as well. So it's a matter of, that's how I operate. They train hard, but they enjoy training because I like to put a football in their hand to train. I grew up doing road runs through the Penrith Mountains and getting flogged, and having coaches say, we'll give them the ball in January and make them hungry for it, so we didn't have a football in our hand. So, our first few games, obviously, your skill levels were down. So, those sort of things, because I had 13 coaches in eight first grade coaches in the 13 years I played with Penrith, 8. So whether I learned something from everyone, but I certainly learned a lot about the fact that you don't last long if you've not set the system up properly, if you don't deal with your players properly, if you don't treat them with the respect they're due, particularly, again, the 100, 200 game player versus a 19-year-old rookie. So those sorts of things are, where I come from,
You've, as you said, you started out in Penrith. You had a great career out there. Then you coached them. You took them to their first finals. You took Canberra and West to their first premiership. I mean, it's just been a long and storied career, Tim, and I'm wondering what insight this has given you about helping teams step up and realise their potential.
To start with, one of the things as a coach or a manager you've got to have is good recruitment policy and have a good eye for that type of thing. I think the best coaches are good recruiters, and you started me off with what makes a good coach. Because really, as Jack Gibson, one of the famous coaches that you say that that we're in the game, and certainly I coached against him. I had the privilege of coaching against him just at the back end of his career. Was the players have something to do with it. A nice simple statement he used to make when they won premierships, and it's true. You've got to develop the right group. They might not all be representative players, but they have to suit your style. My style is obviously an attacking style. The rule book says score more points than the opposition, and I take that literally and look for an offensive game. And in fact, a good offence will beat a well-organised defence any day. Any day. The coaches who say, it's all about defence, with respect, that's their philosophy. That's not mine. You've still got to be able to tackle, right? But it's not about, if you're going to go out there and say, well, we'll just defend ourselves, defend every week and not score enough points, you're not going to win. Most teams will score points at you. You've got to be able to score more than them. That in turn is a defence, if you follow what I'm saying. But not that you don't do anything about it, but the individual needs to be able to tackle and be physically fit and strong and so on and so on. So, I'm getting off the track a little bit, but at the end of the day, your philosophies and your recruitment and so on are very important. For those first, for instance, the Penrith one, I think was as good a coaching as I've ever done. And for me personally, because of where we finished through the 70s and early 80s when I played, we never made a semi-final. Mind you, it was top 5, but we never made a semi-final. So to make a semi-final in 85 was, to me, as good a thing as I've coached. And that includes the grand finals and World Cup and all that sort of stuff that I've won.
Tim, the words that come up a lot when people talk about your coaching style are innovation, experimentation, just trying new things. It seems to be a trademark of what you do. You say it's an offensive style, but you're also innovating. Now,
yes,
people that innovate often get a lot of feedback, and not all of it's good. I'm wondering how you've learned to deal with the more conservative stakeholders in the game as you've gone about changing the game.
Well, generally as first grade coach, you get a fair amount of what you want. If you want a piece of equipment, or you need to take them on a camp, or you need to do, I was pushing for training centres way back when I was at the Raiders. We looked at some schools that closed down in the ACT, and we were going to do that. They eventually their first what would you call it? Their first training centre was they put it up on a piece of land that was Tech College allowed them to put a building up and use their field. So I'd seen that in America and so on. So getting a professional setup was what I was looking for right back in those days, and the club was prepared to help in big time. So I haven't had much trouble or pushback from that type of thing, but. Part of being, different or innovative or whatever you want to call it is to spark the players. They train hard. In the old days, they were training 3 days, playing on the 4th day of a 7-day week, and then working. So it was pretty hard on them to turn up and then have a full day's work, turn up for training, and then say, right, now we're going to just run, 2K runs, 5K runs, road runs, we're going to flog the hell out of you. And not put a football in their hand, which is what they play for. The football is the best thing you can do as a coach. whether it's a soccer ball or football or baseball or whatever, is to get them out there practicing, and training while you practice is the best thing. These days, of course, with all the GPS they can put on them, you don't have to have too many times, with a stopwatch anymore. You can pick up what their speed is and everything, basically on the vest they wear these days. So, but again, the whole thing needs to be, I want to be there, and if players are coming in late or they're straggling or they're that type of thing, obviously the environment isn't right, and you've got to work hard to make sure that it is. So, as well as challenging, most athletes are really competitive, that drives them into athletics or football or whatever sport. So the training has to be competitive as well, and rewards for wins and other things I always found work really well, because the one thing they wanted to do, if you played the left edge against your right edge in defence and offence, they really competed hard. So as much as possible, I use that type of technique. A lot of coaches at those same days, in those days, were just using stopwatches to run hundreds and doing 20 hundreds and doing all these sorts of things. Although the conditioners were involved in that as well. I was lucky to have some very good people who said to me, we should be doing more with this and more with that. And of course, whatever we do with the ball in the hand. 90% of it has to be with a football in their hands. The fundamental thing about winning a game or doing anything is to be able to control the football. And if you can't pass and you can't, your kickers can't kick and your catchers can't catch because they're not doing anything with the ball on a regular basis. They do these days, but in the old days when it was 3 days a week, it was, Tuesday they flogged you. Thursday you did some ball work, and Saturday you did a captain's run and went for a beer before you played on Sunday. So it's changed quite significantly from there.
The world has changed.
It sure has, yeah. But as far as I say, the discipline type of thing, there are coaches who do a lot of jumping and are very active in the box, and you think a lot of people think that's great. They're passionate and so on, but God love them, most of them, they need someone in the box for them to translate what they're saying down to the sideline to take it onto the ground. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to use any examples there, but I know it for a fact. So it is everyone's different. Again, you coach your personality, and if you're an intense person and you're an intense player or athlete, you'll be intense if you're a coach. Because if you're not, you're not true to your spirit, So, but it's how you control that, how you control it.
Tim, how much of your communication, if you look at an average week and you divide it up on a pie chart, how much of it's individual with the players versus speaking to collectives of people, groups?
Depends. Again, pre-season, it's a lot more. You spend a lot more time with them, individually and as groups. Because you're explaining a new season starting, you've got fresh players coming in. You've got, if you're new to the club, for instance, even, you've got a lot of things to do. The language is very important. The what they call their plays and so on and so on. So all of that has to be practiced. You've got to introduce the new players that come generally to your club every year or grow up through your system coming through the juniors. And so, pre-season's different to during season, and of course, then post at the back of the season, if you're in the big games, you're doing a lot more with individuals again. So I don't know if I could put as you say, a pie on it, what percentage it would be. All I know is that I would deal with them more individually in pre-season. And just towards the back end of the season, if you're chasing semi-finals and so on, there's a lot of work to be done in respect to keeping them focused and not panicking and so on and so on. And then, of course, if you make the finals, there's a hell of a lot of that changes things as well. That's a different scenario again. But one thing's for sure, I do a lot of one-on-ones with players. I like to hear their individual input into what happened during the game, and also I like to give them my input as well. But I'm interested to hear what they think about the game, because during the game you can discuss things with the key people, your spine as they call it, your key people that are running the game. But the guy out on the wing, or the guy in the centres or in the middle of the scrum, he's got an opinion as well. And it's interesting to get it, because sometimes you get a feeling of, what happened here, we didn't do this, we didn't do that, and so on and so on. And it's not always who you thought or what you thought when you really talk to people, or, and again, when you look at your video, because coaches do interviews straight after a game. And the league do that deliberately, as do the media, because they want the emotion that comes with just after the game, And of course, that's where coaches get fined. Ask Rick. He's, when he gets fired up. But then then you go home, watch the video, and you think, oh hell, I was quite something wrong there. Yeah, I did the wrong thing there, or whatever. It doesn't always compute that the two things come together nicely. So sometimes you're paying fines, other times you get an apology, and sometimes you have to give an apology. So, but it is emotional. It's professional sport, and it is win or be sacked. And we've all, they talk about coaches are waiting to be sacked. That's basically when you start coaching. It's a matter of how long before you're sacked. And we've all had a level of that, even the best, Wayne Bennett and so on. So, it doesn't mean that you're not a good coach. It just means sometimes you're a round peg in a square hole. You don't fit with the organisation, and you need to find a round hole to join. Yeah.
Can I pick up on emotions and intensity, Tim? You another word that comes up is intensity. People talk about you being intense, but they also reference it when it comes to the way you prepare people, the train, and the way you focus on performance. You've had such a long journey and time in the game. I'm wondering, you must have found a way to switch this intensity on and off, or I imagine you just would have burnt out. Is there anything that you've learned that you think others could fold into their own toolkit to get better at switching that intensity on and off?
Yeah, it is interesting that as a person yourself, if you're coaching or you're playing, you're starting at teenager, generally between there and your retirement, you get married and you have children. The kids do that, and coaches are the same. Your family life is tough on your family. There's no doubt if you're full on. And so, the priorities are, it's like there's a job and there's a profession. Professions are 24/7. You're thinking about it. You're not always working, but you're thinking about it. The players can go home, look at their video and forget it, and then train and not worry about it. Coaches are forever thinking about it from the end of the last whistle, the final whistle on the day. You've got 3 injuries. You've got all these sorts of things. You've got poor players that you think have played poorly, and you've warned them, so you've probably got to change a couple of players. I generally try not to drop a player without giving him a warning, particularly a senior player. 19-year-old might be in for the week and out straight away because the other player comes back in, and you've got to deal with that. But yeah, it is constantly your head's in it, even if your legs aren't. You're not running around with them and doing those sorts of things. But to say, I think, 40 years or something since I started professionally coaching this year, and I look back and think, where's that time gone? Because when you're flat out, time goes fast. I used to count the calendar by the season, round 5, round 10. But having an interest, like having, some coaches play golf, some do this, some, a lot of them get out just to get out. And I use the gym a bit, and I haven't got a lot of interest. The shoulder doesn't let me hit a golf ball anymore. But, you try to switch off. It's not easy. And people will tell you, Sheens talks football under the water, and you're getting that gist now. This interview is going to go longer than you think. But it is one of those things that, it's cost me in my personal life a bit. And so, there are consequences, for the game, but the game's been good to me, and I've had plenty of ups and plenty of downs, but over a period of time, it was the thing that as I say, you don't work a day in your life if you're doing something you enjoy, and I think I didn't see getting up at 5 to go to work and coming home at 9 at night as work. It was just enjoyment. I enjoyed doing what I had to do.
Can I ask you, Tim? I don't want to ask you about the downs. There's been enough written about the whole incident recently with the disgraceful decision that West's made. I don't think we need to go into it. I think that there's been enough written.
No. I don't want to talk about it.
But one of the things, you always asked your players, and this has been consistent through your career, to develop the ability to play at least 2 positions. Now, in a world where we're increasingly being pushed into specialisation, we're getting smaller and smaller pigeonholes. Why was more generalisation important to you?
Because in a long season, unless you've got, and particularly under salary cap, you've got limited access to players of experience. In the old days, there's no salary cap. You could buy a player halfway through the year, and that's not a problem as long as the club could afford it. So you needed versatility from the point of view of an injury during a game. You carry 4 interchange, but in days gone by, it used to be 2 and various other versions of it, unlimited when Super League first kicked off. So you need to be able to, in an instant, say, we'll move so-and-so to that position and we'll put so-and-so onto something else. So, you've got to train them in sometimes those positions as well. You've got to, for instance, Benji Marshall started as a centre. If I didn't have Brett Hodgson, I probably would have played in fullback. I didn't have a 5'8", so we ended up at 5'8", which where he played at school. But he's played other positions during the game because he is an athlete. Robbie Farah did the same. Ricky Stewart was a specialist half. Laurie Daly, they played 5'8", centre, lock forward and fullback in the early days until he settled down as a 5'8". So, on their way through, for instance, players developing the skills to be a first grader rather than a schoolboy, sometimes you've got to, take a back seat and play just to get a game in any position. So I know at school I was always a 5'8" centre, and I went to grade. I was big enough, but I was big for a 5'8", but I was too slow for 5'8" in first grade. So the coach said, you go into the forwards, you're big enough, and the bit of speed that I did have and skill from being a 5'8" helped me be a forward, So I learned in the early days that, and I saw it regularly. Players come in as a 19-year-old centre and end up a 29-year-old back rower or front rower. Ask Jason Croker. Jason went from wing to centre to 5'8" to lock forward to second row to front row. He went all that way through, not because he was getting lazy and fat. It's because as he got older, he slowed a bit, but he's a tough kid and he just played anywhere you wanted him to play. The dreaded, as they call it in our game, utility player who plays in the 14 jumper regularly, he can play 3 or 4 positions. He can play halfback, 5'8", and hooker if you needed to be. He'd play lock forward. I played Cameron Smith lock forward during games at times and brought on a fresh hooker. Those sorts of things are just, it'd be lovely to say 13 will start, those 13 will stay in those positions and so on. The 4 on the bench have to cover 13 positions to start with. And although the positions are cut down, you've got 2 centres, but you've got a left and a right and 2 second rowers, 2 wingers, 2 front rowers, I know. But even playing left and right is a challenge for some players who carry a ball specifically in the right hand, can struggle sometimes playing on the left side of the field, because they're carrying with the ball in the area where the impact zone. So even the 4 players that you've got to balance those 4 players, you've got to be able to play somewhere in the 13 positions And so having them being able to play 2 or 3 positions and understanding that that's their role, it's a 17-man game these days. But the interchange guy, or you get an injury during the game, or you get a send-off, or you get a sin bin, you've got to be able to adjust fairly quickly. So they've got to know how to play. I don't teach them all how to kick or anything, but Glenn Lazarus could kick a ball, Darryl Broman for Penrith. They're just because they were pigeonholed into a position didn't mean they didn't have skill levels. Glenn Lazarus came from the second row, and I put him in the front row because of an injury, a serious injury to Brent Todd, which was a year injury. So Glenn started playing front row for the year and ended up probably the best front row, or one of them anyway, just to have played the game, certainly on his results. So yeah, that's basically why. And I think most coaches have it in their heads, he could play centre if he had to, or he can play second row. They're out there on the edge side by side anyway these days. The game's changed dramatically from the 2 centres playing together and that type of thing, which was the rugby union style in us as we came. And Warren Ryan, of course, dramatically changed the game into left and right, and that was I give him all the credit for that.
Tim, there's this term in the USA. It's not used so much actually in Australia or Europe. It's called a coaching tree, and they use it to describe people that have played under you as players and have gone on to coach themselves. Now, what's interesting about your tree is there are 4 other men who have gone on to become premiership coaches. Now, and of course, there's one who's tragically passed away. But what I wanted to ask you was, you've had some success at being a leader yourself, but also nurturing other people to go on and lead. And I'm wondering if you've identified anything that's important when it comes to developing future talent to lead.
Yeah, generally, Paul, they'll come from they're intelligent players. They'll come from around your ruck area, the spine, the hooker, the halfbacks, the fullback, centres. Mal, for instance, played centre all his career, although I did see him play back row once on a tour under old Don Ferner, and he didn't like it. But overall, though, coaches have come from systems where they've had to think about the game while they're playing it. They're the smarter players. But to say you can pick them, no, I could never pick Laurie Daly as a coach, let alone a media guy, or Rick. Rick said to me once, I don't know. I said, "You want to coach?" He said, I don't know what I'm going to do until I do it. He was a very off-the-cuff player. Des Hasler was exactly the same. I played with Des. He's a Penrith junior. Even though he hates me saying that because I'm so old, he says But my last year was his first year in grade. Anyway, so yeah, it does. It just you never know. I mean, Craig Bellamy is a classic. I gave Craig his first job as under 23s coach, or under 21s. I can't remember now, but it was the 3rd grade side, and Craig, I thought would go into conditioning and that side of the game, performance in that regard, because he was very, very fit and pushed himself to the limits and so on, and was interested, in that, and a great bloke. Outside of when he's intense, he's a terrific bloke. And that's his trade-off for the intensity. I think the players still love him. But and that helps, of course, when you get results, doesn't it? You justify anything you can do then once you've got the experience and the results. But no, I wouldn't have picked Laurie Daly, as I said, as a media guy, or Greg Alexander as a media guy. They're young idiots who run around young. You can't put it, and you shouldn't try to put a 30-year-old head on a 19-year-old kid. That's again another thing I've learned. By treating them differently, they're going to make mistakes. That they're young. So, there's, but to say sometimes you can see it. Other times, a young kid at West, I won't name him, but he didn't play a lot of first grade, but he was as captain of the lower grades, very smart kid. And I thought this kid will be a good coach. We might even make a good referee, because the referees were looking for young players who weren't quite going to make it. And went around the clubs asking, would there be any, and they were going to become apprentice referees, This is just prior to the 2-referee system we had for a while. And then, of course, the 2-referee system, a lot of the younger blokes got game time because they were part of the second referee on the game. Anyway, I put it to him about being a referee. He said, no way in the world, because he didn't want to, he thought the referees were the worst thing ever, but I'd seen him turn referees inside out on the field with knowing the rules and all the other things which is why I loved him. But he knocked back $90,000 a year to be an apprentice referee. And, I think he regrets it these days. But so you can't always pick who's going to jump out of the air and be a coach, and yet alone be a successful coach. So a lot of players become assistant coaches, no doubt. Not all of them go on to be first grade coaches, let alone great first grade coaches who win premierships. And although, you can sometimes fall into a group, if you're lucky, when you coach, when you leave a club, you leave a legacy. And when you go to a club, you gain a legacy from that previous administration. There's always some good and bad in that, both ways. And so it's, being able to learn to be able to then take the good and improve it. And not everyone can do that. Every now and then you get a champion team that, as I was lucky enough with Canberra, although we had 2 champion teams there, we had the 87, 88 group, 89, 90, 91, lost them to salary cap, and then we reinvented the 94 side, and that, 93 we should have won it or could have won it, except for my captain who wouldn't come off the field. That's Rick again. I can say these things because I know he'll take it with a grin. It was a lesson well learned. He broke his end up. I was going to move him in a Parramatta game about 3 games from the end of the season. We were really demolishing sides. We were leading Parramatta by 60 points, and at home I said, give Ricky a break. Anyway, the trainer went out and you give the trainer a gobful. I'm not coming off. A minute later, he badly fractured and broke his leg, his ankle. So he missed the semis and we went straight in and straight out. So I every now and then remind him about that. So as I think it was a very good experience from the point of view of if a player tells him he's staying on the field, not coming off when he wants to take you off, Ricky has something to say about it. So, those sorts of experiences, you just don't know, like Rick when he left the club after I did and ended up at Canterbury and then Roosters give him a junior start in coaching and away he went, So he's done a great job. So Laurie, representative coaching, Mal, representative coaching, they're things that, they all had the intelligence to the game. That's the first thing that you'd say. If you're not a smart player, you're not going to be a smart coach, But and in saying that, I'm not having to go at every player. There's certain amounts of players who play in a position where they've got their job to do, and that's it. They don't mind. It's an important part. Every part of the game is important, but some people have to run the game. They have to see the game in their head. Peter Sterling, for instance, I always remember the comment he made when asked about, how do you read the game? He said, take your eyes off the play the ball. And actually have a look at the game, So little things like that are players that, you're going to say, well, a percentage of them may end up coaching. And Craig went on to do performance with Wayne Bennett at Broncos, and then gradually started to, throw in a few ideas and so on and so on, and Wayne ended up getting a coaching gig when Wayne was away on rep footy or something, and he took the first grade side and played West, I think it was, at Campbelltown, had a win, and they called it Bronco babies or baby Broncos or something it was, that's right. And Craig then just went, further and further up the ladder with the Broncos with Wayne, and had to leave obviously to get a job. Fortunately for me, West Tigers interviewed him and he knocked him back and went on to Melbourne, which was fortunate for him. And fortunately for me, I got the job after him. So after coaching him at Raiders, yeah.
There's a couple of names in there which I'll be chasing down, listeners, over the next year or so. I don't know. Craig Bellamy will go on to be a legend of the game. Mel Meninga, Warren Ryan. I mean, some of the names are just legends. Yeah. But I'd like to stick with you, if we can, Mr. Sheens, because we're not finished yet. I want to go back in time. Okay. Your great uncle played the first ever game for Balmain. When I found that stat, I thought that was quite amazing, because 100 years later, you're coaching the team. It's quite amazing. And, the great thing about rugby league is this, it's just such a game of belonging and identity. And I wanted to ask you what you've learned about creating this sense of connection, motivation, and identity in a group, which is often just full of professionals moving from one club to another.
Yeah. Ricky's very big on this too. I'm actually going down to say hello to him and do some things for the club next week, actually. I think he understood. He made a comment which about the Raiders of his era, about how close they were as players, how they did everything together, trained hard, competed hard, drank hard, but had a bond. The fact that they were successful because they were talented obviously helped that too. But because nothing better than winning to bring a group of players together. You have a bad season, it can fracture you somewhat, because you've got to make some big decisions on who stays, who doesn't. Whereas a really good premiership standard side or a top four standard side, and I say top four, not top eight. Top four is where you need to be if you're really going to be a chance to win a competition, and a winning team in that regard, the momentum tends to keep you going. There's lots of things that help you as a coach. Certainly, if you're coaching down the other end of the scale, it's tough. Yeah. My first gig was Penrith in 1984, and he made me professional. I was probably one of the first, if not the first, professional coach in rugby league in Australia. Although Jack Gibson was independently wealthy, so he didn't work out. but you know what I mean. Like most of guys were school teachers, and I've got a bust of his head that I bought at an auction, weighs a ton. Used to put my cap on top of it. So he was really good to me, Jack, even when he was coaching against me. The back end, as I said, back end of his career. But the situation of the morale and the general feeling, not just in a team, it has to be in your club as well. It has to be your people. I remember the Tigers, for instance. I was living at Penrith when I first came down from Townsville. I was getting up at 4 to get to work and beat the traffic, which comes down from the mountains there, and going to Sydney. And there'd be someone there at training, someone there at the club before me, the conditioner and even the CEO. He came from Campbelltown, Stephen Noyce. So it was people there before you got there and people there after you got there. There was no one in a hurry to leave at 2:00 in the afternoon when the players finished. The players would do extras, or they'd hang together, they'd go and have a coffee together, and I encouraged that too. I'm not taking credit for it, but as soon as I smelt it, I encouraged it. So it's that type of people you need. There's three things you're looking for. One is public perception. What they think of your club and your team. 2 is public perception, your opposition, and little groups over here talking about little groups over there. They're the 3 things you've got to work on all the time. What they think of your club, what they think of your team. So you've got to do promos, you've got to do all sorts of things outside just playing football. You've got to sell your club. Your opposition is obvious, right? This is in any business I'm talking about, let alone sport.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it applies to all businesses. So you've got your opposition. That's a natural. We're always trying to improve ourselves to be better than them. And then you've got little groups talking about little groups. And what happens there, that splits your club. You get that little politic thing happening. That doesn't mean, having a lunch there and having a bit of lunch here. I'm generally talking about inside your organisation, there are groups, and they're talking about other groups inside the organisation. That's the thing that'll drag your club down and drag your morale down. So you've got to do something about that every day. We obviously do something about the opposition every day. We come to training to prepare and beat them. The other one is public perception these days, particularly with your websites and your you can control the narrative, not let the media do it. You can control them, and you've got a website, and you get the news first. So you push the narrative, and you talk to people who've got angst with you, whether it's a sponsor or this, that, or the other thing. You go to fan engagement days as a coach and you talk. They generally get it wrong. You'd be surprised how many times they get it wrong. We thought this and we thought that, And then, of course, making sure that everybody inside the organisation is when I say happy with one another, you've always got competition inside, but I won't have groups shooting other groups down. That's a major problem.
Tim, if I could take you back, I've got the time machine downstairs. I'll dust it off. If I could take you back and introduce you to that young man who was studying law, right? He was studying law and he was thinking about which path to take in life. Knowing what you know now, what would you say to him?
Part of me would say, why didn't you finish your law degree and become a lawyer? There are days like that, but really, no, Paul. I think, given the experience I've had and the game's been really good to me. I've had my rough moments, as I say, but overall, the game's been really good to me. Roy Simmons said it. He's got dementia. He will not blame the game for dementia. And he would hit you over the ear if you tried to say that to him, He knew what he was doing, and the game was good to him and has been and still continues to be good to him. So it is something that, as I said earlier, I haven't worked a day in my life because I've been involved with footy and I've enjoyed every moment of it. And the experience that comes with your downs as well prepares you for those things. And so, you understand it's experience. It's the 29-year-old veteran, as you get older as a coach, you know what to expect and how to manage it if you can. Sometimes it's out of your hands. Referee, two things anyway, injury and referees, as in ruled interpretations are the two things you've got very little, if no, say in. And they're the two things that can really destroy you. You lose key players during a year, you can't replace them. And people think you should be able to, but it's, excuse the expression, but it's bullshit. You can't. You haven't got a roster in salary cap. Some clubs have, but you haven't got a key halfback to replace another key halfback, and that type of thing. Even some of the more stronger clubs will tell you that. Roosters have had trouble over a few years over halfback, since Cooper, injuries to their key people. You lose your fullback like I lost Tedesco in 2012 in the very first game. He did a cruciate ligament, lost him for the year. I'd still be coaching West Tigers if Teddy had continued to play. And I say that, I genuinely say that, and I think it was proven, when as he continued to play for the Tigers for that short period of time after that, and then grabbed by the Roosters. So, key players and and a poor decision or a bounce of the ball. That's probably the third one. That shaped ball never bounces true. Yeah. So it's one of those things that you've got certain things in your set you tend to learn and live with that. But some never get over the referee thing, and understandably because referees going full time and got video reviews now and so on and so on, which is why it all came in, to decide was it a try or not a try, video refereeing, which has expanded out to, giving the captains a say and so on. It's been great. It's a great, system, but it's still human nature and human error and human interpretation, So they're going to get it wrong at times. Unfortunately, if it happens to hurt you, a key one, it comes down hard on referees. So I feel for them. I'd never want to be one, but I feel for them. And truly, I've seen it from the days when, as I say, they were part-time right through to being fully professional, well-paid officials now with, the amount of tech they've got to cover themselves is brilliant, But even then with them, they get them wrong sometimes, the interpretations and so on. So, but sometimes, obviously that keeps the media in business. So without controversy in our game, they'd have nothing to write about. It's all on TV. In the old days, there's only a certain amount of games on TV. So you had to go to the game to see your game. And the media had to go and report the game. He scored a good try, and they don't do that anymore. Everyone can stay at home and watch it on flat screen TV. It's better to get a better view than you do at the ground. So it's changed a lot, but put the pressure on a lot of people, players, referees. They can look up your nose with those cameras these days, and you're under the spotlight. So there's a whole heap of things that have changed, and sometimes that's why I'd say, why did I become a solicitor? I was actually doing more as an article clerk, working in Penrith and playing at the same. I started playing at the same time, so around just after I got out of school.
Well, look, Tim, I want to finish with one last question, if I could. And we're back to Ricky Stewart. Of course, Ricky kindly introduced me to you. And Ricky, of course, for those listening, was one of the great coaches we interviewed a year or so back. But Ricky had this interesting quote, Tim. He said, "The greatest compliment for a coach is to have others copy you, and a lot copied Tim." But what he doesn't say is exactly what they copied. So I wanted to finish, Tim, by asking you, in those quite small moments when you do reflect, what is it that you hope that these other people have copied from you in a positive way?
I think I'd like to think anyway, although I've been criticised for it sometimes, and is I like to play an open style of game, from the point of view of, and I recruit players accordingly. But that all started with just common sense. If you haven't got a massive forward pack and you've got a brilliant back line, well, you play to your strengths. You might improve your forwards, and that was the Raiders in 88 when I got there. They had a big name back line and a no-name forward pack. But eventually the forwards, the Lazaruses, the Walters and Bradley Clydes of this world, turned out to be as good as anyone that played. But at the time I had with Ricky and Laurie and Mal Meninga and, Laurie in the centres, 5'8", Peter Jackson, Chris O'Sullivan, Ivan Henjak, Kevin Walters, they were all playing there in 88. So it was a backline team. Chicka Ferguson on the wing, Gary Belcher at fullback, So we moved the ball, and that's why Ricky got his game at halfback, because the other halfbacks couldn't throw the ball as far as he could with his left hand, in particular left to right, the rugby union background, and him kicking left and right footed. The others were as many ways as competitive as Rick, and that's a big statement because there's not too many more competitive than Rick. But Ivan Henjak, Chrissy O'Sullivan, those sorts of guys, But Rick had a skill set that suited what I wanted to do based on what the team looked like, Most halfbacks, Greg Alexander, Roy Simmons, they could not throw a left to right. They had to turn their back to throw right to left. The skills of the game have improved dramatically because of coaching and also full-time football. But in those days, Ricky could throw a left to right pass as far as he could throw a right to left and, cut out 4 people. And when you got backline that we had. So, those sort of things, I'd like to think people, an attacking style of football, to me, is the style to play. Now, if you can score 30 points a game, the opposition have to be able to score 31 to beat you, and not every team can do that. And I use that as my philosophy, simple as that. Played schoolboy footy as a back, so I didn't play as a bullfed forward, as they say. Played as a back. I used to love to play and run with the ball and kick a ball and so on. I was a goal kicker and all that. Never got to do that in grade, but the old toe poke football. But basically it was all about, using the ball and attacking and scoring tries. And so that was my background. So that's what I built a team around that. Players who could make a difference in the team offensively were the first I'd look at before I look at their defence. If they couldn't tackle, well, they wouldn't have got that far if they can't tackle. And then it's just a matter with defence, instead of putting a system together of defence. If they can all tackle and you get them doing the same thing, whether it's jamming in or drifting out or doing whatever, man on man, as long as they can tackle one-on-one, then they're okay. They don't have to be brutal, or champion wrestlers and all that sort of stuff. But although the game, definitely the speed of the play, the ball controls the game somewhat. But I firmly believe in the offensive side of the game, and other coaches will say differently. But I know in 2005 we were giving away a lot of points, scoring a lot of points. We got into the semis against the best teams in the comp, St George, Brisbane, and Parramatta, and not Broncos. I said that Cowboys. We had on average 10 points a game scored against us on average, and 32 points for. So we went through the semi-finals undefeated, right, averaging 32 points and only giving up 10. Whereas during the year, I was averaging just mid-20s, but we had to score 30 to win, and we were. But we were capable of doing it, and but we didn't have, for whatever reason, the size, the experience, and lots of other things in defence. So we had to scramble well in defence. If someone made a break, everyone's effort was to get back on side really quickly, which we were able to do because we weren't a big side. So, and the Raiders, of course, we had two areas there. The 88 side should have won it. Great side. Had all those players before they went off to Brisbane. Some of them went off to Brisbane. Sammy back on them. Then we won it. 89, 90, and unlucky 91, and then had to reinvent ourselves and get it good again for 94. So, but again, it was with the core of the team, Laurie, Ricky, Mal, and so on, and a good bunch of young kids coming through, the Mullinses and that of this world, Croker, and we redid it again. But to say, I was very, very lucky to be involved with those guys. I might have helped them, but they certainly helped my reputation too. Don't worry about that. Worried the hell out of me as well, that everyone would get to the game on time, and I'd have no problem after the game when they hit Canberra on a nightclub. I'd have to go down there. That was my excuse anyway. I'd go down there and make sure I stayed with them to make sure they did the right thing.
Well, Canberra is a small town. I'm sure you had your feelers out for what those boys were up to. But Tim,
I was told. Don't worry.
It's been an absolute pleasure to interview today and to get to know you over a few phone calls as we prepared. It's just it's a complete masterclass, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there listening whose career you've helped along the way and whose lives you've touched through those fan events and so forth. But I can only thank you again for making the time available and taking us a little bit behind the curtain on what's been a stellar career.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks very much, mate. It's brought back a lot of memories, good and bad, but more good than bad, mate. So don't worry. So and I'll be ready for the phone calls from Ricky and that if and when it comes. I'll see you next week anyway. You'll let me know then.
Thanks, Tim.
No problem. Thanks, Paul. All the best.
Hi, everyone. You have been listening to the great coach, Tim Sheens. I hope you got a lot out of Tim's story and found a few ideas that you can bring back to your own dinner table, locker room, or work table for discussion. When I listened back, some of the other key highlights for me were how his experience having coached 4 players who have ultimately gone on to coach their own premiership teams has taught him that you can't pick who is going to go on and become a good coach. His view that when you leave a club, you leave a legacy. When you go to a club, you gain a legacy. And the challenge is to do what you can to improve it. And how if you don't treat the players with respect, you won't last long in the job. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And just before we go, if you have any feedback, then please let us know. Just like Trent Williams, who after listening to our Brandon Joyce podcast said, "Great listen and lessons from a legend." Thanks, Trent. We love the interaction with the people around the world who listen. And so if you have any feedback or comments, please let us know. And if they're positive ones, then please let your friends know too. All the details on how to connect with us are in the show notes or on our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com.